Somewhere in Japan right now, there's a house with dishes still sitting in the sink. A calendar on the wall, stuck on a month from years ago. The porch light might even still work. Nobody lives there. Nobody's coming back. And it is not the only one, not even close. That house is what's called an Akiya, literally empty house. And Japan has somewhere between 9 and 10 million of them. That's not a typo. 1 out of every 7 homes in the entire country is sitting empty right now. If you live somewhere like the US, the UK, Canada, or Australia, where buying a house feels like running a marathon just to lose, that number should stop you cold. Because here's the part that doesn't add up. Japan isn't short on people who'd love a cheap house. Some of these are practically free. So why isn't every empty house in Japan already taken? Start with the obvious explanation. Because it's real, even if it's not the whole story. Japan's population is shrinking. Not slowing down, shrinking. More people die in Japan every year than are born. And that's been true for over a decade. The country has lost around 4 million people in the last 20 years. That's like an entire major city disappearing off the map, and nobody moved in to replace it. And it's not just shrinking, it's aging faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. Something close to a third of the population is over 65. The national median age is 49. In the US, it's closer to 39. So you've got a country with fewer people, and the people who remain are overwhelmingly clustered around Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya, chasing jobs and schools the same way people do everywhere else. Rural towns get left behind almost entirely. In some prefectures, Wakayama, Tokushima, Kagoshima, 1 in every 5 houses now stands empty. When someone's elderly parents pass away in one of those towns, their kids are usually 30-something, living in a Tokyo apartment, with zero interest in inheriting a farmhouse 3 hours from the nearest train station. That part makes sense. Fewer people, more empty houses in the places people are leaving. Simple. Except, Tokyo isn't one of those places. Tokyo is growing. Tokyo is where everyone's moving to. And Tokyo still has close to 1 million empty homes sitting inside it. So population decline explains the countryside. It does not explain a global megacity with more empty houses than most countries have houses, period. Here's where it stops being a story about demographics and starts being a story about paperwork, because Japan's tax system does something that sounds almost like a joke, except it's completely real. If you own a house in Japan, and that house is standing, doesn't matter if it's falling apart, doesn't matter if it's structurally 1 storm away from gone, you get a massive discount on your property tax. The moment you tear it down, to build something new, or just to clear the lot, that discount disappears. Your tax bill can jump dramatically, overnight, for the crime of having empty land instead of a crumbling structure on it. Think about the incentive that creates. If you're an elderly homeowner, or someone who just inherited a wreck of a house 3 hours outside Osaka, demolishing it doesn't just cost you the demolition fee, which can run into the tens of thousands of dollars for a wood frame house. It also raises your annual tax bill for as long as you own that land. So the financially rational move is to do nothing. Let it sit. Let the weeds take over. Let the roof slowly cave in. Multiply that decision by millions of homeowners making the same calculation year after year, and you don't get abandoned houses by accident. You get abandoned houses by design. A law meant to protect homeowners from being taxed off their land ended up quietly incentivizing decay on a national scale. And that's before you even get to what these houses are legally considered to be worth, which, it turns out, is basically nothing. In most of the world, an old house is a selling point. 100-year-old brownstone in Boston, a Victorian in London, that age is the value. Buyers pay more for old. Japan runs on the opposite logic entirely. A wooden house is treated, financially, almost like a car. The moment it's built, it starts depreciating, and by around 20 to 22 years old, it's considered essentially worthless. Not worth less. Worthless. On paper, the land might still have value, but the house sitting on it, the bank, the tax assessor, the market, none of them see it as an asset anymore. They see it as something that will eventually need to be removed. Part of this comes down to earthquakes. Older buildings genuinely are less safe in a country that gets hit with major quakes regularly, so newer construction standards really do matter. But the depreciation schedule is brutally fast, regardless of how well built or well maintained a specific house actually is. A meticulously restored 40-year-old home and a collapsing 40-year-old shack get valued almost identically, near zero. So picture the position that puts people in. You inherit your grandmother's house. It's structurally fine. Someone kept it clean for 60 years. And the market tells you it's worth nothing, while the land under it might be worth something, but only if you tear down a house that's still, structurally, completely usable. Which raises the obvious next question. If the house itself is worth zero the day the original owner dies, what actually happens to it? Legally, it gets messy fast. When a homeowner dies in Japan, the house is supposed to pass to their heirs. But if there's no will, or the heirs can't agree, or nobody formally registers the transfer, the property just sits in legal limbo. Nobody officially owns it enough to sell it, but somebody technically owns it too much for the local government to just take it. Multiply that across generations. Grandparents pass it to parents. Parents pass it to children who never update the paperwork. And you get houses where the owner is legally a list of a dozen scattered relatives who've never agreed on anything. Picture a fairly typical version of this. Someone inherits their parents' house in a small coastal town. They live 4 hours away, already have their own mortgage and their own life. The house needs a new roof. The taxes are due either way, and selling it would mean tracking down siblings who haven't spoken in years just to get a signature. The path of least resistance isn't selling. It's doing nothing and hoping the problem waits. And then there's a factor that doesn't show up on any spreadsheet: stigma. In Japan, a house where someone died alone and with an aging, increasingly isolated population, that happens often, can become almost unsellable, no matter how good the price. Buyers will pass on a property at a fraction of market value just to avoid that history. So you end up with millions of houses stuck, for reasons that have nothing to do with location or condition. Tangled ownership, family stalemates, and a cultural weight no spreadsheet can price in. Which is exactly the pressure that's pushed some Japanese towns to try something that would have sounded insane a decade ago: giving these houses away to anyone, including people who've never set foot in Japan before. Local governments call them Akiya banks, listing sites where towns post their empty houses, sometimes at a steep discount, sometimes for genuinely nothing, just to get someone, anyone, to take over the taxes and upkeep before the place collapses entirely. In the last few years, this has turned into a full-blown online phenomenon. People, mostly from the US, Canada, and Australia, buying abandoned Japanese farmhouses for $3,000, $5,000, $15,000, filming the entire renovation and posting it. Some of these stories are genuinely wild. There's a well-documented case of someone buying an 11-room abandoned farmhouse for around $15,000, spending months rebuilding it, and turning it into a rental that now pulls in 5 figures a month. Videos like that rack up millions of views, because on paper, it sounds like the plot of a movie. Buy a crumbling shack for less than a used car, end up owning a boutique countryside estate. But, and this is the part most of those viral clips leave out, free or cheap is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. A structurally sound Akiya might run a few $1,000s. Renovating it to modern, livable standards can run $50,000 to $100,000, sometimes more, depending on how far gone it is. You're often inheriting decades of deferred maintenance, bad wiring, no insulation, a roof that was only fine because nobody stress-tested it in a typhoon. Then there's the ongoing property tax, and often a location so remote that even Japanese buyers won't touch it. No train station, no hospital nearby, a shrinking town with a shrinking reason to exist. So it's not a scam, exactly. It's just a much bigger project than the thumbnail makes it look, which, honestly, is true of most buy-it-for-nothing stories anywhere in the world. But step back from the individual house flip stories for a second, because there's a bigger pattern here that Japan just happens to be experiencing first. Japan isn't actually alone here. It's just further along than everyone else. South Korea has one of the fastest declining birth rates on the planet, faster even than Japan's, and rural depopulation is already following the exact same script. Parts of rural Italy have been selling €1 houses for over a decade, for nearly identical reasons: an aging population, emptying villages, houses nobody wants to inherit. Pockets of Spain are following the same pattern. What Japan is really showing the rest of the world is a preview. A country can be wealthy, stable, technologically advanced, and still end up with millions of empty houses, simply because it ran out of the one thing a house actually needs to have value: somebody who wants to live in it. That's the part that should unsettle you more than the abandoned house drone footage does. 10 million empty houses isn't really a story about houses. It's a story about what happens to a place once there's no one left to fill it. And depending on where you live, that might be closer to your future than you think. If you had to guess, would you take a free house in the middle of nowhere, knowing everything you know now? Drop your honest answer below. I'm curious how split this actually is.